Good morning. I would like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the City Governance Committee meeting of the 15th of June, and I declare this meeting open at 10:17. I would like to advise attendees in the room that this meeting is being webcasted and audio recorded. Do any councillors have a leave of absence to declare? And I do note that we do have one from Councillor Bannon, and Mayor Power has just rejoined us. Do I have a mover for the motion on the board to grant Councillor Bannon leave of absence? Thank you. Councillor Murphy has moved. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Karansky. I will now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. All right, we will get straight into it. 4.1, I will now refer to item 4.1 and I will ask that we have the Acting Information Technology Services Manager, Mr. Jared Nelson, is joining us today to please enter discussions. Before we open discussion, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, over to you, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, I'd like to walk through and provide some highlights on the policy that's been presented this morning. The Information Technology Management Policy seeks to, realign some of the challenges that councils had in the past in the technology space, some of those driven by changes in the way technology operates and the ongoing changing nature of council as a business. The policy seeks to establish a number of guiding principles, 8 guiding principles, that will then be able to cascade down into the organisation in the way decision-making is undertaken and IT continues to develop and service delivery within that space. Those principles very much align to what we're finding industry standard approach. They've been developed after extensive consultation both internally and externally, and they very much provide a foundation to allow council to move forward to improving the way that we can provide services to the community and manage our operations internally. As a quick summary, the key principles that are talked about are information first. This is about acknowledging that while historically a lot of technology was about which systems are used and those sorts of things, this is about realigning and redirecting the focus of the organisation to understand that data is actually at our core. Information, what we have, who we talk to, how things operate is actually at our core. So we established that as a guiding principle, that information is critical. We look at digital by design as a principle. So while it sort of seems in a modern environment almost a little obvious to suggest that we should start with digital, the reality is making it very explicit to say, our intent is that the way we operate ourselves and the way we interact with our community is digital right from the design phase, not as an add-on. We look at simple and simplified solutions. So one of the challenges for any organisation, one of our senior staff regularly speaks about it and says these days a lot of technology can do anything. The key is to actually understand how best to put it together to deliver value for the business. So we're looking very much at simple and simplified solutions, reducing complexity, coming back to what's important. Controlling technical diversity is a partner to that. So moving away from having lots and lots of different solutions to a consolidated view where we minimise diversity and use that to drive efficiency and effectiveness. Obviously, cloud is a key component for us. So again, establishing that as a principle aligns with the direction that the business is moving and the way the community expects us to be operating. Security, as you've all heard before, obviously very critical. So again, setting that as a guiding principle and using that as a core platform. Being pragmatic. So instead of looking at perfection in everything we do, being pragmatic and understanding that technology is often about a balance and sticking to, as I said, that sort of core platform approach with a centralised, coordinated response. In summary, that's sort of where the policy sits. I'd be more than happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you. I have Councillor Bradley, then Mayor Power.
Thank you, through the chair. I appreciate you bringing this policy up, and I understand also that there's more detail underneath this policy that we haven't been given. But I just want to ask a question, just practical as in my role as councillor, for example, and I'm sure other councillors experience this. It's so important for us to have access to information. And for me, being here for a while, information that is previously I've had access to, I don't have access to anymore. For example, my emails. And officers come to me and they say, oh, XYZ has happened. I'm like, no, that's not how it is. And I've got it all in emails from previously where that isn't the case, but I don't have access to them. So is there a possibility of getting access to those previous emails?
Through the chair, I could answer that one. There's probably a little bit of a different question to the essence of this particular policy. This particular policy is about making sure we've got information and information is readily available. Question in relation to a councillor requesting information, that's a little bit of a different question.
Excuse me, it wasn't requesting information, it was having access. So that's what I'm saying about this policy is like you've got an overarching policy, but underneath is the detail that we haven't been given. So I don't know if that detail gives me access to those previous emails that I should be given access to.
Perhaps more of the question might be, was there a cloud-based scenario before where everything was kept, or was it all...
no, that's not the question.
So that it was kept so that you could access it, or was it all cut off? And
so, just through the chair, so I take the question, Councillor Bradley, as your own emails that you've previously had at council. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so you've got concern that they no longer exist in council systems?
I don't have access to them.
Yeah. So that's a separate question in relation to getting access to those historical emails.
But the policy is referring to information and data, so that is my concern as a councillor. I'm raising it as a concern, and I don't know whether that's in the detail that's underneath this policy. I would want to make sure that I have access to those emails.
The detail in this policy is that information absolutely should still be retained in council systems. That's the essence of the principle of this policy, that information is maintained, identified and maintained and managed effectively. So information across the organisation. So those emails definitely will be in council system. Getting access to them, that's a question. Happy to take that on notice and to review that, Councillor Bradley, and have a look at why you haven't been given access to those historical emails. Yeah.
Councillor Kransky wants to have something to say just before Mayor Power.
Not with respect to this report, but with regard to previous emails from the previous term. It's taken quite a while, but I have access to them and I can search them. It's difficult, but I have them. And my councillor advisor struggles, so she searches through mine. But I have them, and I believe Councillor Raven has his from the previous term as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Power.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Robert, is this going to sharpen up some of the areas that were brought upon in the interim report, the audit that we've got here in the late report, some of the issues here?
I'm happy to start and then Jared can kick in. I think that some of those issues in that particular report were around access to the system, so what information was available to users of the system. Some staff, for example, have super user access to information, to systems. That report also identifies where someone leaves council that their credentials, their ability to access systems are terminated in a timely manner. So a lot of those recommendations are already in place. They aren't necessarily tied to this policy. This policy is more in relation to those 8 principles that will guide us in relation to making better decisions with regard to council systems. But that is with a view to including increasing cyber security, resilience, and a lot of those issues in that report do relate to security matters. So
And the
in that respect,
transition of information to the cloud?
yeah, that's right, in relation to doing that in a safe way, because part of the concern is we're a very large organisation with many branches that set up their own systems and they're not necessarily centrally scrutinised. So because they might put information in the cloud that they shouldn't put in the cloud, so that's why it's got to go through a central process to make sure that it's being done appropriately. That's correct.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. Do I have a mover for the motion that is on the screen? Thank you. Councillor Raven has moved. Thank you. Councillor Stamp has seconded. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried, not unanimously. Councillor Bradley, how did you vote? Oh, did you? Apologies. Thank you. That marks the end of the Acting Information Technology Services Manager's report. Is there any general business for us? Just before he goes, Jared, any general business for us? That's all right. Any general business for us today?
Through the chair, no, thank you.
No? Anyone have any general business for Jared? No? Perfect. Now you can go. Thank you. All right. I will now refer to item 5.1 and I will ask Finance Manager Ms Caroline Bugg to please enter discussions. And before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? Now, I do note that 5.1 is confidential and it is considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session as the confidential report includes personal details and private details. However, I do remind councillors that if there's no desire to discuss the confidential matters and we have all read our reports, there's no requirement to move into closed sessions. So I will now open the floor to vote. Does anyone want to go into confidential? Councillor Murphy has moved that we go into confidential. Thank you. Thank you. And Councillor Russell has seconded. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. We will now move into confidential. Thank you. I have a motion on the screen, and Councillor Murphy has moved the report's motion as displayed on the screen. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Lane has seconded. All those in favour of the motion that's on the screen? Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay. We are on to item 5.2, and before we open discussion on this, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? Nope. There being none, I do note that item 5.2 is confidential and that it is considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into closed session, as the confidential attachment contains detailed budget information. However, if there is no desire to discuss the confidential matters, and we've all read our reports, there is no requirement to move into closed session. Would anyone like to put us into confidential? No. There being none, I will hand over to Caroline, just remembering we're not in confidential. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Item 5.2 is the April Executive Financial Report. Overall, there's not a great deal of new information regarding risks or stresses across the business for the end of April. We did add the risk of pricing increases in the wholesale electricity market, although it's unlikely to impact this financial year, but I think it's prudent to highlight that now. Overall, the operating surplus is in a very strong position of $34 million, which is $7.5 million in front of budget year to date. The variance continues to be driven by an underspend in expenditure, and the key areas remain employee costs, which are tracking below budget, just shy of $3 million at the end of April. However, that variance did double in the month of April, but that was due to a timing issue between our budget and when we expected a certified agreement back payment as agreed in that agreement. But the back payment will actually be made in May, so you'll see that variance come back out in your May report. And also the bulk water purchases continue to track under budget, but again that's a revenue offset by revenue directly. Just noting that the capital delivery has been impacted by the wet weather in February and the general wet weather since. Rates and charges continue to be on track with a number of property owners on the hardship agreements dropping in the month of April, which is reflecting a general change in the ability of owners to maintain payments in rates and charges, which is a good position to be in. And in regard to the sundry debtors, the comment there would be around the Department of Main Roads. There's a $200,000 debt in the April report that was paid in May, so that's no longer on our books. Other than that, happy to take any questions you may have.
Does anyone have any questions? Nope. Councillor Bradley?
Sorry, I'm not sure if it is a GB or it's part of this. It's about LIP, and do we need to, is it possible to get an update if we have any money outstanding for LIP for the financial year?
Thank you, Councillor. We can do that. It will take us a little bit of time to compile that information, but I'm happy to ask for that to be done at probably at the end of May will be the most recent information for you.
Lovely, thank you. Any further questions? No. There is a motion on the screen. Do I have a mover for the motion that's displayed on the screen? Thank you. Councillor Murphy has moved. Councillor Stemp has seconded. All those in, I'll now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. All right, that marks the end of Ms Bugg's reports. Do you have any general business for us this morning? Nope. Any general business for Ms Bugg? Nope. Lovely. Thank you very much. Moving right along. Awesome. Okay, I will now refer to item 6.1, and Ms Kay Sullivan has sat down, and I will ask her to enter discussions. But before we open discussion, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, over to you, Ms Sullivan. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors, and through the chair. 6.1 relates to our strategic contracting procedures. and our annual contracting plan. I'll take the report as read and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillors. Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to bring your attention to page 26. And as soon as I find it on my fangle-dangled, 26, and it refers to it's a requirement of the LGR that Council make and adopt a contracting plan each financial year. After Council adopts the annual budget, blah, 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 Council's corporate plan 21 to 26 and City Vision, innovative, dynamic city of the future, strongly influences the strategic planning and development of the contracting plan. If we could change the vision to the new one, that'd be great.
Through the Chair, absolutely. My apologies.
Lovely.
There's also a few documents that have it in it still, but I just assume because you're using an old template. I see nodding from Caroline behind, but I'm happy to email those through to you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any further questions? No. Lovely. On the screen, we have a motion. Do I have a mover for the report as displayed on the screen? Oh, sorry, Councillor Jeremiah. Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that report? Thank you, Councillor Stamp. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried. All right, we are over to 6.2. Now, we do note that 6.2 to 6.6 are all confidential. So before we go into confidential for 6.2, we're going to have a motion that we go into confidential in bulk for 6.2 and 6.6. So I propose that we take 6.2 to 6.6 into confidential discussions in bulk. But before we do any councillors have any conflicts of interest to declare on 6.2 to 6.6? Negative? Okay. We're just putting a motion on the screen to go into confidential in bulk, and hopefully that will save us a little bit of time when we come out. Okay, I have a motion on the screen. So I note that 6.2 to 6.6 are all confidential in nature, and it is considered necessary to take the discussion of these reports into a closed session as the content of the report contains confidential elements of each report. Do any councillors wish to move into confidential item for this session? And I remind councillors that if there is no desire to discuss the confidential matters, there is no requirement to move into closed session. If so, I will now open the floor to vote.
A question, Madam Chair. Sorry. So, Robert, when moving in under different sections of the regulation on different ones, is that allowable? I thought we could only go in if we're all under the same one. The same reason, essentially.
The motion that's been put on the screen, the revised motion, includes all of those, in summary, reasons that are articulated in those individual reports, so it's okay.
Sorry, there was too many for me to read, hence why it's on the screen. Sorry, did I have a mover then to go into confidential? Councillor Bradley has moved. Do I have a seconder to go into confidential? Thank you. Councillor Murphy has seconded. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has actually been carried unanimously. Thank you. And we will just ask the gallery to leave, and then we will turn the recording off. Okay. So we have to work through 6.2 to 6.6, and we will work through each motion separately as we go through. So on the board, you have 6.2 on the board, if you just cast your eye over it. Do I have a mover for the report for 6.2? Thank you, Councillor Raven has moved. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Murphy. All those in favour of 6.2, please raise your hand. Yes, they do. Okay, that's been carried unanimously. Thank you. And we'll just have to do this a bit slowly because we've got quite a few to go through. Okay, and 6.3 is on the board. Cast your eye over that one. Do I have a mover for 6.3? Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Do I have a seconder for 6.3? Thank you, Councillor Stemp. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. Okay, this is 6.4 and this is the amended motion that's on the screen for 6.4. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Seconded by Councillor Hall. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. Okay, we're up to 6.5. And the motion is on the screen. Thank you. That's been moved by Councillor Murphy. Do I have a seconder for 6.5? Thank you, Councillor Hall. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That's been carried unanimously. The last of the confidentials, I have 6.6. And that is on the screen for 6.6. Do I have a mover for 6.6? Thank you, Councillor Stemp. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mayor Power. All those in favour of 6.6, please raise your hand. Thank you. That's been carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you for being so patient. That marks the end of Kay's reports for today. Is there any general business for us?
Nothing today, thank you.
Thank you very much. I will move on to the next item. Thank you. All right, we will move on to 7.1, and I have asked Acting Corporate Governance Manager Miss Anita White to enter discussions before we open discussion to any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare on 7.1. There being none, I will now refer to Miss White to open public discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors. Item 7.1 relates to an annual budget item of $15,000 for donations to charity organisations. I'll take the report as read, however, I wanted to highlight a few points. Donations of $5,000 have been made annually to each of Volunteer Marine Rescue, RACQ Care Flight and Logan Beaudesert Crime Stoppers for a period of time, I think up to about 20 years. Whilst the community benefit provided by those organisations is not in doubt, it is appropriate to consider whether those funds might better be distributed having regard to the changing nature of the community and Council's contribution to organisations such as these through various sources. The report outlines 4 options for Council's consideration, but ultimately recommends that the funds for the current financial year be re-provisioned to next year and the budget be transferred to Community Services Branch for delivery through the grants programs they administer. It's not anticipated that this would be a new grants program, but rather be sufficiently flexible to ensure sufficient funds are available to meet community requirements, example being able to provide assistance in response to a natural disaster. The funds are available to organisations not based in Logan, but providing benefit to the Logan community. I would be happy to take any questions.
Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, through the Chair. Thank you, Anita. When was the last time that these funds were paid to these organisations? Thank you.
Through the chair, the funds for the previous financial year were not paid due to COVID, so it is now sort of coming up to 3 years since these organisations received the funding. They have, however, previously been advised that Council would be reviewing these funding arrangements.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Power.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess this is our contribution that we know our residents use constantly. I know that the Volunteer Marine Rescue, which operates down at Jacobs Well, has a lot of Logan people voting. I'm going to be honest, they rescued me at one stage. I got bogged with my jet ski. But I've got to say that a lot of Logan residents use the service. And it's good to have them there, and it's about paying our share. I know it's not based in Logan. I understand that it's outside of our city, but our residents are in need of this, and I think it would be mean-spirited of this city to remove our contribution to these organisations, in particular the Marine Rescue and the RACQ Care Flight. I don't have a great big understanding of the reason why we fund the Logan Bay Desert Crime Stoppers, but certainly the first two I would support definitely.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Raven, then Councillor Kransky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm inclined to agree with the Mayor. While I'm sure that the funding would go to deserving community organisations through a grant process, funding community organisations as opposed to charities that do a significant body of unique work is two different kettles of fish. So I'd support continuing that the $15,000 remain for charity, for an annual donation to charity. I'm happy if there's a review of other charities that want to be included or you want to rotate it through, but I agree with the Mayor that even though these charities, with the exception of Crime Stoppers, aren't necessarily based in the city, they certainly provide residents of the city services that we'd be far worse off without. I am interested to know if you've been rescued by the Volunteer Marine Rescue, though. Do you have a conflict of interest? Because that'll be relevant later when we're talking about a different item.
Councillor Kransky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a tough one, I think. I hear what the Mayor's saying, and I've had some association with at least one of these groups in the past also. But what I would say is it's not... this report is suggesting that the funds be repositioned and then the community services branch could potentially reutilise those funds for charities that or organisations that we're constantly being approached for support and consistently across the city. But I see that the Mayor's Charity Trust is a better fit for these kinds of organisations to approach for funding as opposed to this coming out as a recurring expense year on year. So please don't misunderstand my messaging here. I think that Volunteer Marine Rescue, RACQ Care Flight and Logan Bay Desert Crime Stoppers are very valid organisations that Logan residents do from time to time utilise. But I think that we can do this better, and my suggestion would be that the annual budget is transferred to the Community Services branch, and that these organisations, if they are of a mind to liaise with our charity trust to see if there's a future there for them.
Thank you. Councillor Lane.
By contacting Crime Stoppers in 2019, people directly contributed to a total of 18,686 charges being laid by police, which included arrests across the Bay Desert and Logan Police District. That's enough said about that. Let's just keep the money where it is, I think.
Sorry, I couldn't get your attention there, Mr. Mayor. Does anyone else have anything else they would like to ask or add? So question, if we were to move the money and reposition it back into the community grants funding, could these charities apply through that avenue?
Sorry, I'd have to take that question on notice, Councillor, as I'm not really as close enough as I would need to be to answer that question around the community grants policy.
Do you want to put the... Yep, the motion is on the screen. Oh, okay. Now I've got questions. All right, Councillor Lane, then Councillor Raven.
Sorry, just in direct answer to that, I had to request that one of my schools on the border of Logan and Brisbane, which primarily have my students attend it, be included on a list to be considered for community grants. So it's not a guarantee that they would get it.
Nothing's ever a guarantee. Councillor Raven.
And the concern I was going to raise, Madam Chair, is that the Mayor's Charity Trust is an independent board, so they may not see value in supporting these charities, and we would have no way of directing them to see that value. So the only way to ensure that these charities continue to be funded, if that's the desire of council, is to continue the program or possibly expand it. But you can't. But if you want to flick it off to the charity trust, they may not get funded because they have a different benchmark for what they fund and what they choose to fund and how they want to do it.
Okay, I've got Councillor Stamp and then Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, it was my understanding from the briefings that we asked this question whether or not these people could actually apply through the grant funding set up, and then we were told that they would have as much ability to do so as anybody else. So it'd be great to get some clarity on that, maybe even moving the report, holding the report over to get some clarity on that, because that's important in terms of decision making, surely.
Perhaps we could defer it into ordinary council if we're waiting on that.
Yep, Councillor Russell.
Thank you. I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in. By principle, I think that it makes sense to be moving that money into a competitive round. However, when you're applying for a grant, there's no guarantee that you get it, and it becomes a different nature of how that money can be used when it's sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't, as opposed to when you're guaranteed to get it. I just think we need to be thinking about that as well. I'm undecided at this point, but I just wanted to raise that.
Yep, Councillor Murphy.
The reason why I asked Anita how often we have funded this, we haven't funded these programs for the last 3 years. Can I ask, please, Anita, obviously last year was COVID, but prior to that, were the payments stopped because of administration or what reasons that they didn't receive the funds? And if we were to continue this on, but would they have to show any KPIs for us funding these programs? Is there some sort of accountability? That's all I want to ask for transparency of our community.
Through the Chair, my understanding is that each year a decision was made and the cheque was sent. There was, with the letter, there was no a requirement for them to acquit for a particular program or to report on what they had done.
And have they contacted us since we stopped giving them funding?
Through the Chair, I've not been notified of any contact. Point of clarification, if I could, we're talking about the 21-22 financial year where we haven't made a payment. We also didn't make a payment in the 2021 financial year, so the last payment was made in 2019-20, if I've got that right. Sorry.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, we will put the original motion on the screen. And we have a foreshadowed one in a tick. All right. Yes.
Madam Chair.
Foreshadowed one is to defer.
I'll be supporting the deferral because I'd like that information to come back from the community services area before I make a commitment one way or the other, please.
Okay, so the original motion is on the screen. Do I have a move? Oh, sorry. We've just gone straight to the deferral. Okay, we're on the amended one. And it's just deferred to a future City Governance Committee meeting. I don't think we will get enough answers between now and ordinary council. Is everyone happy with what's on the screen? Councillor Harrimore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we voting on the amended motion or the original motion?
No, we've gone to the amended motion now, sorry.
So there's
Sorry,
been-
they keep flipping between screens.
Okay.
Sorry,
thank you.
yes. Let's
we're-
go for the original motion first, like I've said, and then we will go to the amended motion. So do I have a mover for the original motion that is on the screen? Councillor Bradley has moved the original motion. Councillor Murphy has seconded. All those in favour? That has been lost. That was Councillor Bradley, Councillor Kransky, Councillor Murphy and myself in favour. And then we will put the amended motion on the screen. Sorry. Councillor Mayor Power, how did you vote in that one? Councillor Lane?
Against.
Councillor Russell?
Against.
Councillor, Councillor Hall? Oh no, I'll come back. Sorry. Sorry.
I assumed it was me.
I was having a mental blank. Sorry. Councillor Raven, how did you vote?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Hall?
Yeah, against.
Thank you. Councillor Fraser?
Against.
Councillor Heremiah?
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Stem?
Against.
Thank you. And then we will put the amended motion up. Sorry, I had a total mental blank. Yep.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, we can't, I mean, it feels like it's quite a simple question. We can't put it through to the ordinary council. We wouldn't be able to get those questions answered.
So through the chair, we can, if the question is, if for example, it's those organisations weren't able to apply for that central grant process, though there may be subsequent discussion in relation to what to do with the money, or would it fall back to the original recommendation, I guess is the question. I just think there may be future discussion that may need to be had and future information that may need to be gathered for you to make an informed decision. But happy to change it to the ordinary council if you'd like to. But
Councillor Lane?
Madam Chair, the motion was lost. Is this a new motion? Yes. It's not an amendment.
Anyone have... Okay, so we will test this one, that the matter be deferred to a future City Governance Committee meeting for further consideration. All those in favour? Sorry, that one has been moved by Councillor Lane. Do I have a seconder for the motion that's on the screen? I'll second it. All those in favour that it defers to a future City Governance Committee meeting? All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That has been carried, so keep your hands in the air. That is Councillor Lane in favour, Councillor Russell, Councillor Kransky, Councillor Hall, Councillor Fraser and myself in favour. Hang on. Councillor Raven, you had your hand up 2 seconds ago. No? Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, that still is 6. Oh, and Councillor Heremiah. Thank you. Okay, Mayor Power? Abstain. Abstain. Councillor Bradley?
I wish to abstain because I would have thought that information could come up for the ordinary council meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Raven?
I wish to abstain because I think we could bring it back to an ordinary council meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Stemp?
I wish to abstain for the same reason.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy? Thank you. Beautiful. We've got that all. Thank you. All right, over to 7.2. Thanks, Anita. Sorry. Do you want me to introduce it? Sorry, I just got such a mind blank then. Hang on. Sorry. Now opening 7.2. Before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? No, there being none, sorry, I'll open to Ms Anita White to open discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Item 7.2 relates to the delegations review for 2022. It presents to you the revised delegations from Council to the CEO to take effect from 1 November 2022. These delegations must be reviewed annually to meet the requirements of the Local Government Act. I appreciate there's a lot of detail in this report, which is why we've provided a separate briefing to allow questions to be raised, distributed the material in advance of the agenda and made ourselves available for individual questions. We hope that's been of assistance. As a reminder, the delegations are of statutory powers only and provide the vehicle by which the administration of council can continue in an efficient and effective way. Of importance to note is that the strategic decisions of Council, including budget, corporate plan, are retained by Council. We do not consider that there are any material changes to the powers that Council had, although the approach itself is different. It's important also to remember that if a particular set of circumstances should arise where Council does want to be the decision maker, Council can direct the CEO not to exercise the delegation, provided no decision has yet been made, and request a report be brought to Council. And there's the opportunity to review these delegations at least once annually to ensure that councillors remain comfortable with the decision-making framework. The delegation framework operationalises decisions which Council must make under legislation and local laws, which extends over 150 pieces of legislation. Once Council adopts the delegations to the CEO, there will then be a separate process for the CEO to sub-delegate some of those powers to appropriately qualified officers. For the first time this year, they'll also be accompanied by implementation of a new technology solution to make accessing delegations easier for officers, including mandatory training for holders of delegations, and provide a compliance mechanism to ensure that decision makers acknowledge and are updated of any changes to their delegations. I'd be happy to take any further questions.
Thank you. I have Councillor Kransky, Raven and then Bradley.
Anita, I acknowledge that a huge amount of work went into this, and I also note that you offered ample opportunities for consultation with councillors, so thank you for that. Mine is just a minor query. It's on page 338, and it pertains to the questions and responses provided by officers. I'll just give you a chance to get there. And if I may just suggest a slight amendment on two of the items. So at the bottom of the page there and over the page, it reads CEO Powers Certified Agreement. Councillors want to be involved in decisions about certified agreement and do not want these delegated to the CEO by default, and of course you provided a response. And then the next one is CEO Powers Appointment of Directors. Councillors want to be involved in decisions about the appointment of directors and do not want these delegated to the CEO by default. Could I suggest that the amendment is that some councillors, because some of these things I have seen up close and personally, and I did not put my position forward that I wanted to be involved in those things. So if some councillors, that would be appreciated.
Noted. Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I read similar to Councillor Kransky, that sounded like all councillors wanted something, whereas it was probably just one or two councillors asking that question. And as one of the councillors asking some of those questions, I know all I did was ask. I didn't say we all wanted. I just asked, could we? Is it possible to investigate? Anita, I've got two questions. So first off, thank you for the work you've done and the opportunity to ask questions and get feedback in the lead-up and the briefings that you provided. I just want to bring something to Council's attention, that once these powers are delegated, and they're currently delegated anyway, just in a much more clunky form, but once they're delegated, they just get used carte blanche without you actually having much line of sight over when they're used. There are some exceptions where reports will come up or chairs will be aware, but generally, once they're out in the wilderness, staff can use them as they see fit and as appropriately delegated. So my question, which means that today you're making a decision to reinforce that, and hopefully this new system is U-Butte and we can somehow review when and where they get used. And that's my first question. Yes, please.
So what the system does is inform officers very specifically of the powers that they are exercising. So that then will show, what we will get is how often are officers accessing it to be able to understand if they're referring to the technology solution in making decisions. It doesn't track actual decisions against the use of the delegation. So we wouldn't be able to provide you with, we've made 200 decisions under section whatever of the legislation.
Thank you. That's unfortunate, because that would be really helpful for interested councillors to be able to go back and say, well, we've given a significant amount of delegations here for all these operational matters. It's just interesting to understand how they get used and what they get used to decide, because my other concern is the only way for us to call in a delegation is if we intercept the use of the delegation before it's actually exercised. So there's intent to use the delegation, but before it gets exercised we can call it in. But there's no actual way for a councillor to know that a delegation is about to be used, is there?
Not ordinarily. if there will be examples, however, where it's very usual for officers to be consulting with divisional councillors about decisions. So that might happen, say, from my experience in the acquisition space. So that happens as a matter of course, and but to call and at that point, if there was significant concern, you could say, I want to report on this, and that would have to, though, be a direction to the CEO to enable that to happen.
And so in the past we have used this before to call in a code accessible development, and that's probably a good example where councillors know it's coming, because there's the divisional councillor and the chair are notified, and it can be circulated, and if it's controversial, council can make a decision to ask the CEO to bring it up. I guess I was hoping that with the amount of power that sits in the organisation to exercise the authority given to us under many, many acts, it would be good to be able to review that and understand exactly how that power is used. Because otherwise, without the delegations, council would be expected to vote on them. And in smaller councils, they do. And I don't want to vote on them because it's operational. But I would like the ability to understand how often delegations are used and what they're used for, so we can understand what is being done on behalf of the board when we pass these powers to the organisation.
Through the chair, I'll take that on notice and have a look at the technology solution. I guess the caution I would add is that, are we adding bureaucracy in terms of, reporting on decisions that are made all day, every day about registering a cat?
And that's not my intent. I don't think that we should have regular review reports coming up that say, these are all the decisions that were made this week under delegation. It'd be good to be able to do a snapshot where you go, give us 20 examples of delegations that were used in the last quarter, and you could have a look at it through a briefing or even just a report that comes to an interested councillor, or to the audit committee, just to understand how they're being used and if the technology is being used as well, because that sounds like something you're motivated to understand. I just think it would be helpful to be able to understand, once power has been given by the board to the CEO, who then sub-delegates it, understanding how that power is used, I think, has got merit and relevance. But I agree with you, not intending to bog the organisation down with red tape, just as an occasional opportunity to have a snapshot of what's going on.
Through the chair, I think it's a very good call out, and I think from a compliance perspective, that's what we would like to see embedded, and so that would, I think, turn to snap audits, if you like, of, is everyone aware of their delegations? Are they using them appropriately? Show me examples of how you're documenting it. So that would be how we'd build it into the compliance framework.
Thank you. I have Councillor Bradley, Power, then Lane.
Thank you, through the chair. My question was very similar, was how do we know decisions are going to be made under the delegations? I mean, I've put up lots and lots of requests for reports for code accessible developments over the years, because that is in our line of sight. We get a daily update of new developments. So, but yeah, it's anything else controversial that we, potentially don't know about. That's the bit that concerns me. If there's any way of just making sure that the divisional councillor is aware of different issues, because they're the litmus test of the community. That's probably my only concern. Question in the end, but because my question initially was very similar to what Councillor Raven was saying, but I just want to make sure that there is some sort of mechanism that the divisional councillor is made aware of issues that potentially are going to be decided upon, delegated upon, I should say.
Anita, are you okay with that one? That was when I was asking and going through, making sure that councillors would still be consulted on certain things, and I think that's what you said, that yes, would still be consulted. Lovely. Okay, Mayor Power.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just allow me 5 minutes to add a bit of commentary to this. Councillors, delegations of authority is a blessing to this organisation. My committee would run till about 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. There'd be one committee before delegations were, well, there was some delegations already in place, but to where we are now. Before my time, Councillor Abel would chair for 2 days, or Councillor Russell Lutton would chair for 2 days, just the town planning committee. So to see the evolvement of this process, I can tell you now, you would not want to go backwards on this. The point of having councillors is like a board of directors, and we're to make decisions on the bigger topics of the council decision-making process. So I endorse the delegation of authority process. I acknowledge that consistently the officers make great decisions. I have not seen a decision that I would change in the years that I've been involved. There is very good reason why the officers make recommendations, and in some degree, well, in most degrees, they are in hold of a lot more information than councils are for those smaller type decisions. So I endorse this recommendation, and truly, if you were a councillor 25, 30 years ago, you would also be in this position.
Thank you. I take it when time comes, you're happy to move the report then? Okay, Councillor Lane.
So I think the reporting of outcomes is important when it comes to delegations. There have been decisions made as a result of delegations that have come back and resulted in service enhancements some years later. They weren't in the best interests of the council. So there are decisions that are made sometimes through delegations, through the provision of, removing staff or reallocating them to other areas and then coming back and asking for a new bite of the cherry. There are issues where council have made a decision to, award a contract, and in doing so have actually ended up costing additional money when it's found that the contractor has potentially not put in the right space or turned it the right way or given much thought to what the community needs. I agree with the Mayor. I would hate to be sitting here day after day looking at these delegations, but I think the reporting on them is very important, particularly when they have a negative connotation to the budget bottom line. I think when we, and I'm trying to speak so carefully about this because I've seen circumstances where decisions have been made through delegations and it's come back as a budget service enhancement in later years. So it actually has cost council money. It has been in the negative. So if there is a reporting mechanism, I'd be happy to support this, but until then I don't think that I can, in all honesty. Thank you.
Anything further to add?
Through the Chair, thanks for those comments, Councillor Lane. What I'd ask you to consider is you don't have that oversight now, so the change is not that we're not changing the reporting. What I've just been told by one of my colleagues working online is that the Pulse technology solution does have an ability to report. But what that will do is add a layer of complexity because quite literally we've probably got 1,000 decisions being made by officers every day, and the reporting of it will become overwhelming and potentially not useful. I think what would be important is to understand what areas you may have particular concerns around, so that we can potentially focus our attention on those areas so that we have focused understanding of the reporting.
I'm more than happy to clarify that. So in staffing matters, a reallocation of staffing or positions that later come back and then ask for the original position back as a staffing position, I have a real issue with that. That to me is just the bureaucracy absorbing positions and then coming back hat in hand asking for further money. So that's a negative impact on the budget. When it comes to the expenditure of or the installation of facilities in our local divisions, I have a situation where my Division 2 local infrastructure program funds are going to have to do an entire project because they were placed incorrectly, no consultation with me on the way they were facing, and it impacted local residents. So in terms of that, I do have concerns with this. So whenever it's a cost of budget, I would like to know. I don't care when a cat's registered. I don't care if you're making a determination on a local contract in respect of that. That's a matter that you guys are best to do. My concern is when it's a negative impact to the budget from a delegation, I would like to know about it.
So through the chair, I think that, they're good points you raised, Councillor Lane. I think we have to be careful. Sometimes they're operational decisions rather than the exercise of a delegation. So they are quite distinct. And where decisions are made for operational reasons that come back and have an impact on future budgets, that should be called out, absolutely. I think, though, to hold up the adoption of the delegations based on those few instances, those few examples where we should be basically getting to the root cause of why those situations are appearing through the budget process, or you having to re-spend money on particular matters, I think we should target in on those individual issues and deal with them rather than not go ahead with the change to the delegations, because what we're doing with these particular delegations is officers will be very much more aware of their delegations and responsibilities under those delegations than they have been under this particular model. So it really is improving the governance. I think Councillor Raven's suggestion in relation to compliance is a good one. And I'm very happy to come and talk to you about those individual circumstances where you've seen bad operational decisions being made.
Okay, I have Councillor Kransky, then Mayor Power.
Sorry, and forgive me, I might have got myself a bit lost in there. Robert, is it okay if we make a slight administrative change adding the word some on page 338 and 339? I was so busy blithering on, I didn't actually hear the outcome of that.
Yes, Councillor Kransky, I was at that briefing and it was certainly some. So
excellent, thank you. I'm happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Power.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to quantify a couple of things. When I say I'm happy with the mix of what is given to us as councillors to make decisions on and what is delegated. Council will always make mistakes. It's the nature of the business and how big the organisation is and the decisions that are made. What I'm talking about is the information that they had at the time of making the decision. We can all criticise after a decision has been made because of the lack of information or unforeseen circumstances, but what I'm getting at is when a decision is made and the information available at the time, I've never doubted the officer's ability to make that decision based on the information.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything further to add? Otherwise, we will put a motion up on the screen. Do I have a mover for the motion that's on the screen? Thank you, Mayor Power. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bradley. All those in favour of what's on the screen, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. No. By everyone except for Councillor Lane. How do you vote?
I'm going to abstain, thank you.
Thank you. Everyone else was in favour. All right, we are over to 7.3, and if you're using your book, it's on page 340. 7.3. Before we open discussion on 7.3, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? No? I will now refer to Ms White to open public discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 7.3 provides an update on the City of Logan Mayor's Charity Trust. The Trust has been reactivated since the appointment of a new board in early 2022. One of the first items they've been asked to consider is the renaming of the Trust, and the current board members have indicated a desire to rename the Trust to the City of Logan Charitable Trust and seek Council's confirmation that they have no objection to that name. At the same time, unfortunately, two of the newly appointed directors have been unable to continue, and so the remaining board members are progressing a skills matrix to inform a recruitment process for two new board members. The outcome of that process will be advised to Council at its conclusion. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions? Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 questions. Just clarifying that Debbie Hill and Gail Kerr are still both members of the board.
Through the chair, yes, they are.
How long is their term? Long time? Little time? Like 1 year? 3 years? Like nearly over? In the middle? Doesn't need to be specific.
They don't have a term, so you would have to remove them as directors.
Well, that was just out of curiosity. My other one was, I understand that we're still providing some administrative support to the trust. Is that right?
Through the chair, that's correct. There is an arrangement in place between the council and the board that we provide administrative support. So we have our executive support team on level 4 take minutes and have established some governance procedures, a team site for the board members to be able to share. The very clear instructions that I've provided to the board is that they should rely on us less and become more self-sufficient, so that we then are really just providing a secretarial support rather than more detailed support.
Great. Offline, can I just have an update on like, how much drain that's putting on that team? Because it's not a huge team and it's missing a person at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks. Any further questions? Nope. There is a motion on the board. Do I have a mover for the motion that's on the board? Thank you. Councillor Bradley has moved that motion. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mayor Powell. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. Over to item 7.4. Before we open discussion, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I will now open to Ms White again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The report presents proposed amendments to the Charter for Council's Audit and Risk Committee. Apologies, the technology was too smart for us and took the tracking out of the circulated copy, but we separately circulated that so that you could see the tracking of the proposed amendments. The most significant change is to include oversight of fraud and complaints management as part of the role of the committee. Those changes have already been endorsed by members of the Audit and Risk Committee, and they seek council support for it.
Thank you. Any questions? No. The motion is on the board. Do I have a mover for the motion on the board? Thank you, Councillor Bradley. That has been moved, and Mayor Power has seconded. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. Okay, over to 7.5. Before we open discussions, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? No, there being none, I will now refer to Ms White to open public discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 7.4 is a review of the Procurement and Appropriations Special Committee. That committee was established in July 2020 to provide support, advice and guidance on Council's procurement and appropriation activities. The Special Committee was established by resolution of Council. They subsequently, by resolution of Council, endorsed their strategic goals in December 2020, and one of those was that there be a review of those goals at the end of each financial year. To meet that target, I've therefore conducted a review on the operation of that committee, and to that end, councillors, directors and managers were requested to evaluate the operation of the committee, and discussions were held with current members of the committee. A summary of that feedback is provided in the report. We're seeking direction from Council on the future operation of the committee, noting we've identified options for Council's consideration in the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Harrimeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To give some context to this report, in 2020, when the Procurement and Appropriations Special Committee was established, I was studying the Company Directors course with the Australian Institute of Company Directors, and what that course mentioned is that all committees and organisations should have KPIs and reviews. So I thought, let's give it a go. We're starting this new special committee. Let's include KPIs and then an annual review of those KPIs. And I think it's been a huge success, and I think we should adopt that model of having KPIs and annual reviews of committees to all committees in council. Now, what I really like about having annual reviews of committees is that I got the feedback from all the members, and it was all, none of it was negative, none of the boxes that are negative were ticked. and it allows me to go back and look at different general business motions that we can bring up to focus and improve the special committee. So, for example, some of the feedback is that we should request some case studies of different projects in council from the council officers to bring a report to this committee. We should request some cost breakdowns and also some social media posts, so we can post on council or councillor social media about our local procurement spend and some good news regarding that. So I expect all of those will be raised in general business. And looking back, I think it was really good to include KPIs and annual reviews of this committee, and I understand why the Australian Institute of Company Directors propose it, and I think we should think about adopting it for all of the committees in council. Madam Chair, when appropriate, I would like to move that this report is received.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Bradley, then Mayor Power.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm just curious who actually requested this in the first instance, the evaluation. Was that the chair that requested it, or?
Madam Chair, may I answer that question?
Yeah.
So, in the terms of reference, I recommended back in 2020 that council officers include in their proposed terms of reference that we do an annual review. Now, my expectation was that all the committee members would sit around and talk about how's it's going, but council officers decided to take a more formal route of putting a report into the committees and making it a lot bigger. I thought just a meeting would be sufficient, but council officers decided to do a report. So that's my perspective.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I am supportive of what Councillor Hieronymi said for GB, etc. And I'm happy to second the reception of the report.
Thank you. I've got Mayor Power, then Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a little bit of commentary. It's ironic that this comes not far after delegated authority, because I think this is meeting residents' expectations and what they think is a core council responsible situation that we should be getting involved in. So I endorse this program. I think it's one of the best decisions we've come up with this council, and I obviously want to see its continuance. I also support the KPI review. I think that's a great idea. It obviously embellishes the hard work that continues, and obviously having outcomes is a good initiative, so I support it as well.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. I guess I'm just a bit confused by the actual recommendation on this report, because it's for consideration, but obviously we were provided with two options, which I believe number one was whether or not it should be returned to the City Governance Committee, or whether it should continue and then obviously take into account their recommendations, which personally I'm in support of option 2, but I think we need to ascertain the actual recommendations for the report.
Through the Chair, obviously this is a decision of council to make, and we can certainly work on the recommendations. It's around, whether it could be that the report be received, but it could also be that the committee continue and that the committee be asked to review their KPIs. We're really in your hands as to what the recommendation you want moving forward.
Have we had many KPIs come up so far? Have discussions occurred in the procurement and appropriations regarding KPIs so far?
Through the Chair, a report was circulated or attached in your agenda papers that talked about the KPIs and how they had been met over the past 2 years of the operation of the committee. So where a KPI was set, there was material provided in substantiation of the satisfaction of those KPIs.
Okay. Councillor Hieronymi, did you want to add anything?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay. Okay. All right. There is an amended motion that is on the board. Yeah, this is an amended motion because in the report it actually says it's only for consideration. So there's an amended motion on the board. So I had a mover in Councillor Bradley.
Well, Madam Chair.
I second the reception. Excuse me,
Oh,
just
okay.
for clarification, I second the reception of the report.
Okay. So, all right, so we're on a totally new one. So, Councillor Jeremiah?
So, Madam Chair, I am proposing that we just receive the report because there's a bit of debate over what the definition of a review is. Now, I personally advocated to council officers that we review the committee every 12 months, but my impression in 2020, 2 years ago, of what a review would be is just the committee members sitting around talking and figuring out what is the future direction. I don't think a full report with all the council resources that come along with it is really needed when we can do it in a far more efficient way. So that's why I'm proposing we just receive this report, because I don't think either option A or B really suits the original intent of the terms of reference.
Okay, so if we just receive the report, we've got procurement and appropriations next week, so perhaps after that meeting, then you can sit with the rest of the group and discuss it then? Is that okay with you?
I move and I think Councillor Bradley seconded that motion.
I move that the motion be put.
Yep. All right. So Councillor Bradley has moved, Councillor Jeremiah has seconded on the screen. It'll stand. All those in favour of the report's motion that's on the screen, please raise your hand. Just to receive it. Yep. So that has been received. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. Then we're on to 8.1. So, hang on, does that mean we are at the end? 7.6, apologies, I'm going too far in my book. I can't even find it. We are on page 378 of the book. All right, before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? Thank you, Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, Councillor Mindy Russell, inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest because of the following. The street that I live in, including my home, was provided assistance in disposing of flood damaged possessions by a group of community members under the informal name of the Mud Army. Louis Namovsky of the charity Logan House Fire Support Network attended briefly. Although I have a declarable conflict of interest, I do not believe that a reasonable person could have a perception of bias. I believe that my street was one of the first in the area to be cleaned up by volunteers. It was in the early days of any formal coordination. It was well before there were any discussions of financial support to the charity. I believe that I would best serve our city by remaining in the meeting. However, I'll respect the decision of the meeting on whether I can remain and participate in the decision.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Russell has informed the meeting of a declarable conflict of interest but has chosen to remain in the meeting. I note that this matter would, other than for Councillor Russell's declarable conflict of interest, have been decided by the councillor under the Act, delegation or other authority. We must now decide if it is in the public interest that Councillor Russell participates in the decision on the matter despite their conflict of interest, or be requested to leave the meeting and not participate. I will now open the floor for councillors to discuss, and I will require someone to move a motion and then provide a reason. Councillor Hall?
I have a question for Councillor Russell. Are you a member of that organisation?
I'm sorry, which organisation are you referring to?
The organisation that your conflict of interest.
Logan House Fire Support.
So,
Yeah,
Mud
the Logan
Army or
House.
Logan House Fire Network.
Are we allowed to say it? We're allowed to say it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
She just said it out loud, so.
Yeah. The Logan House Fire and Support Organisation.
I am not a member of that group.
Are you on the board of that group?
I am not.
I have no further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much. So your home was inundated along with hundreds of other people. In my division, there was about 70, and you did not receive any special benefit, any special consideration as a result of your home getting flooded. You were just some chick in the street who they said, hey, do you want a hand with? I can't see a conflict in this. I just can't see it.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any further questions? Mayor Powell.
Just want to relate to this. It's not how we feel, it's how the residents outside would see this. So I just want to be very clear, it's not what we feel, it's how the residents would see this outside, from outside. And I think we all probably have different opinions on this, and the only way to obviously find that out is to put it to the vote.
Councillor Russell, sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to Mr Mayor's comment. I entirely agree, and I believe that given part of the information, there might be a different perception than with the full information, which is why I wanted to declare and have the opportunity to give the full information today, because I believe that it makes a difference.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Mayor makes a valid point, but perceived conflicts of interest don't exist anymore under the new regime, and it's a regime that he and I both served under last term. This would have definitely been a perceived conflict of interest, but we don't have those anymore. Now we have declarable conflicts of interest, and the bar is much higher for what, and well, the bar is actually lower. If the councillor declares it, they have a declarable conflict. The question before you is whether or not you think they can vote in the public interest having declared that conflict. And what we learn in all conflict of interest matters is that once they're out in the open and they're declared, the problem is essentially addressed because there's nothing shadowy going on because the councillor has openly stated what the conflict is because she's declared it. So the question is, can she vote the public interest, and is it in the public's interest for her to vote? My concern, as with other conflicts of interest that we've had in the past, is that when you say no to someone voting once, they can never vote on that organisation again. And we see that with Parkbridge News, that Councillor Heremiah is comfortable with that, and we've had this discussion before, but it just means that even though it's in a narrow circumstance this time, it means that you get eliminated from considering or discussing that organisation ever again when you've done the right thing by declaring. We'll see how we go. But I acknowledge the Mayor's point about perception, but perception is not what we vote on anymore.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. Just give us 2 seconds. Okay, we're just about to put Councillor Hall.
I see no conflict of interest here. It's a bit like if someone was to take rubbish from the front of your driveway during curbside, all of a sudden you have a conflict of interest because they've removed rubbish from the front of your driveway.
Thank you. Councillor Bradley.
I do have issue with this. No offence, Councillor Russell. I feel when someone gets a personal benefit from something and then you're actually contributing money to them, to the same organisation, it's a perceptual thing. And I hear what Councillor Raven said about, we don't vote on perception, but this is reality. As a councillor, we do. So I can't support this, and because of the personal benefit.
Okay, we have a motion on the screen to test on the floor. If you could all cast your eye over it. This is for Councillor Russell to participate in the decision despite the councillor's conflict of interest. Councillor Lane, they've used your words that you said before. Is that okay? Thank you. Happy to move it. Thank you. Councillor Lane has moved the motion that's on the screen. Do I have a seconder for the motion that's on the screen? Thank you. Councillor Hall has seconded that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Okay, so you're going to have to keep your hands up. So I've got Councillor Lane, Councillor Raven, Councillor Hall, Councillor Fraser, Councillor Stemp, Councillor Murphy and myself in favour. Okay, and then I'm going to go Mayor Power. How did you vote? Against? Councillor Bradley?
Against.
Councillor Karansky?
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Heremiah?
Abstain.
Councillor Stemp, are you in favour? Yeah, okay, awesome. That has been carried, so Councillor Russell can stay in the meeting. Did anyone else have any conflicts of interest to declare? No? Okay. I will now hand over to Ms White to open public discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report, item 7.6, relates to determination of Community Benefit Fund requests for June 2022. I'll take the report as read, however, we'll advise a few high-level facts. The report relates to 3 applications for CBF. 2 relate to applications from Girl Guides Queensland, one from Rochdale District and the other from Beenleigh District. The reason these are referred to Council for consideration is that Girl Guides Queensland is a state-based organisation and therefore not an organisation based in Logan, which is a requirement of the CBF policy. However, the applications do benefit the Logan community. The Divisional Councillors are supportive of the applications to the financial amounts outlined in the report, and there is sufficient money available to meet these requests. The 3rd application relates to the Logan House Fire Support Network. The application was made to all councillors, and separately other councillors have supported the application with contributions from their CBF. The Division 3 councillor has also indicated a support for the application, however it has declared a conflict of interest. Because of that declaration, Council must determine the application in respect of the Division 3 contribution. Sorry, my computer went to sleep. So the Division 3 councillor would like to support the request for $5,000. CBF is a highly regulated funding source, and so the applicants need to comply with the requirements of the legislation. The funds, this application has met the eligibility requirements, and the applicant has confirmed that they will meet the acquittal requirements as set out in the procedure. That includes the provision of proof of receipts for funding for the approved purposes. Any unexpended funding must be returned to Council, and if the funding is not appropriately acquitted, the applicants will be ineligible to receive any further funding. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions from anyone? No? Okay. We will consider all 3 separately. So as there are 3 divisional applications to consider, and accordingly they will all be dealt with separately and in divisional order. So each motion will be displayed separately on the screen for councillors' consideration before the vote is undertaken. So Division 1 Rochdale District Girl Guides is on the board. Do I have a mover on the screen? Thank you. Councillor Bradley has moved, seconded by Councillor Murphy. All those in favour of that one, please raise your hand. Thank you. That's been carried unanimously. Next, we have Division 3, Logan House Fire Network Support. All those, do I have a mover for what's on the screen? Thank you, Councillor Russell. Do I have a seconder for what's on the screen? Councillor Raven has seconded. Do I have a show of hands who's in support? Okay, all right. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. And then last but not least, Division 12, Beenleigh Girl Guides. Do I have a mover for that one? Thank you, Councillor Murphy, seconded by Councillor Bradley. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Now we are over to item 8.1, which is the late report, and I will now refer to item 8.1 before we open discussion. Do we have any councillors with a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I will open to Ms White.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, councillors, apologies for the late report. As luck would have it, the report landed the day after the agenda was distributed, and the legislation requires us to make the report available to the next committee, so the next council meeting. The report provides you with the Queensland Audit Office's review of council's financial statements and assessed controls. The report will also be considered by the Audit and Risk Committee. I should note that this is an interim report with the final audit visit anticipated in August 2022 and the final report provided towards the end of the calendar year. That report will similarly be presented to Council. The report identifies issues and remediation measures being worked through by both the finance and IT branches. As this is an external report provided for Council's information, I may not be able to answer detailed questions, but would certainly be happy to take those on notice.
Thank you. Do I have any questions? No, there being none, the motion is on the board. Do I have a mover for the motion on the board? Thank you, Councillor Raven has moved. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Fraser. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. Now, that marks the end of the Acting Corporate Governance Manager's reports. Do you have any general business for us?
Through the chair. No, thank you.
It's been a marathon. Thank you. Any general business for Anita this morning?
So good to go? Thanks. Recently I sent correspondence out to residents of Kingston informing them of several upcoming projects in Division 2, and I invited them to provide their feedback. I was happy to receive responses back from the community which said they were supportive of the ideas and the plans, but I also received feedback from several residents who are unhappy to receive correspondence from me by paper, given they'd indicated their preferred method of contact was email. They didn't understand why I don't have access to their email addresses and expressed concerns relating to the right hand of council not knowing what the left hand of council is doing. They saw my letter as an unnecessary expense to ratepayers, and quite frankly I agree with them. One ratepayer indicated he receives his utility bill, rates bill, telephone bill, internet bill and rego by email deliberately to reduce paper waste. He acknowledged that his email is used by the companies for various uses within their departments, and he receives promotional material from them. He sees this as the price of doing business. Previously, it's been stated that these emails gathered by council for the purpose of reducing paper use in council for rates cannot be shared with councillors under the Privacy Act. In fact, when we talked about doing e-newsletters, I asked for a list of email addresses in my division, and I was told under the Privacy Act that it couldn't be shared, that it couldn't be used. Now, I've been worrying over this for some time, and I thought I'm going to actually raise it because when someone has a go at me over me not having access to their email addresses that they provided to council, we have a real issue. We say your email is good enough for us to send you the bill so you can pay us some money, but it's not allowed to be used for us to tell you how that money is being spent. Now, I decided to do some investigating. A title transfer does not offer buyers information that their email is only used for rate purposes. If you go to the front counter, you're unadvised it's only for rate notices if you hand over your email. If you go online to the Logan online portal, it does not reference the privacy of your email. In fact, interestingly, I clicked on the little privacy notice on the online portal, and it says, and I quote, Logan City Council may collect your personal information, e.g. name, residential address and phone number, in order to conduct its business and or meet its statutory obligations. The information may be accessed by and or transferred to business partners, contractors, employees and or councillors of Logan City Council and other government agencies for council business related activities. Your information will be handled in accordance with the Information Privacy Act 2009 and may be released to other parties where we are required or authorised by law to do so. Having read that, I believe that we do have an entitlement to access the names and email addresses of ratepayers in our divisions, and I, through you, Director or Manager Anita White, I would like to see us having access to those so that we can reduce our paper waste, our ink use and certainly our postal budgets. I would love to be able to send an e-newsletter out every month to residents in my division and hopefully increase the number of email addresses that Council has as a result of this. So could we please make this happen as soon as possible?
Through the Chair, certainly there, and firstly can I acknowledge your frustration. There's an interplay here between the Information Privacy Act and the Electoral Act. So councillors are entitled to information through the Electoral Act, but that information does not include emails. And the Information Privacy Act considers email addresses personal information. And under that Act, we collect emails for a particular purpose. So to give people their rates notice, or to send them their dog registration or cat registration. I think probably, if I may, I would like to take this one away and explore if there's options. I think that will take a little bit of time, because we'd want to engage with the State Government Department just to ensure that it was, as you know, the Information Privacy Act is being reviewed at the moment, so that may in fact provide some opportunity for flexibility in this space for us as well. But I'd like to take it away and come back with some proposals.
Thanks very much. Just for your information, Brisbane City Council has a portal called ACT, which automatically updates new residents with details. It updates the email information to the ward officers, so they have access to those email addresses. So I would assume what is good for them is good for us in this instance.
Thanks, councillors. Let me take that one away.
Thank you. Councillor Raven.
On that, can't we just change the privacy collection notice to say that your information will be provided to councillors so they can contact you about local matters? And because I had a little bit of a chop at the DA guys with the Logan Plan consultation. I looked at their privacy notice. It was extraordinarily narrow, to the point where no one else in council, including that team, can talk to those people about anything other than Logan Plan 2025, which is silly, because you collect information and then essentially have to destroy it after a 6-month engagement period. So maybe we just need better collection notices all over the organisation. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Any further general business for the Director today? That completes today's agenda. I declare the City Governance Committee meeting 15th of June concluded at 12:44. Thank you very much.